All right, college football and stuff here. This video is my picks for week 6 of the 2021 college football season. All right, jumping right into it with Oklahoma versus Texas, the Red River rivalry. I think this is going to be a good game. Now, I think Oklahoma is probably the better team here, but all of their games have been close games. Outside of the FCS team they played, all their FBS games have been close games. I do think Texas has a shot in this game, though. I think really the storyline here is going to be Texas is going to try to play good, consistent football, and Oklahoma is trying to get some shot plays. So whoever can do what they're trying to do better is going to be the winner in this game. If Texas can stop Oklahoma from getting those big explosive plays, I think they have a chance. Oklahoma has not been good at making consistent drives. I think if Oklahoma can get those shot plays, I think they can win it. I think that's really the difference, is if Texas can stop that or not. I think Texas will be able to be consistent enough on offense that they're able to get points from possessions and run the clock, really, kind of. I'm not expecting some big explosive plays from Texas. I think this is probably one of the best games of the weekend. I think this game is going to be really good. I think it's going to be back and forth. I think Texas is probably a year away from where they really need to be. I think Sarkisian needs another year. I think they've got some issues talent-wise. They've got some talent, but I don't think they have enough talent really across the board. So I think Oklahoma is going to get it done here. Again, I think this is a very, very close game. I think with the way Oklahoma's been playing, there's a very good chance that this game ends up being a push. Oklahoma 3-point favorite. If this was 2.5, I would feel really confident that Oklahoma could probably get it done. I think Oklahoma wins by 3 points. I'm going to take Oklahoma minus the 3, though. I think this is a kind of game where either Texas is up and Oklahoma gets a big explosive play somewhere in the fourth quarter to win it, or Oklahoma has done that earlier in the game and Texas almost comes back but can't quite do it. I think this is going to be a really good game. I think it's going to be close. Give me Oklahoma minus the 3, but I think there's a very, very good chance 3 points is the difference here, and that ends up being a push. All right, next up, Arkansas at Ole Miss. Ole Miss a 5.5-point favorite. Now, both of these teams coming off really tough, demoralizing losses. All right, next up, Arkansas at Ole Miss. Ole Miss a 5.5-point favorite. Now, both of these teams coming off really disappointing losses. Ole Miss thought they were going to be able to do better against Alabama's defense, and they could not. Arkansas got completely shut out against Georgia in what I'm sure was a really tough game. I think both of these teams are going to look better this week because I think Alabama and Georgia are a step above everyone else in college football right now. I think there's a big gap between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I don't think Ole Miss is going to need to go for it on every fourth down like they did against Alabama. And I don't think Arkansas is going to get shut out in this game. Ole Miss's defense is not as bad as they have been, but they're not elite. They're a good defense. And Arkansas has shown that they can score points against a good defense. I don't think Arkansas's defense is as good as Alabama's, and I don't think there is nearly as much pressure on Ole Miss's offense in this game. As far as I don't think they're going to feel like they need to score on every single drive, getting a touchdown like they did against Alabama. They knew Alabama was going to get points, and they knew that if they had a shot in that game, they were going to have to score touchdowns on every possession. I don't think that's going to be the case in this game. I think Ole Miss is probably the slightly better team. Now, this was a really weird game between these two last season. I think Matt Corral threw 5 interceptions in that game. I think they're going to be slightly more prepared for the Arkansas defense this time. I think this is sort of the inverse of what we saw last week with Ole Miss and Alabama, where Alabama was much better prepared for Ole Miss and shut them down. I think Ole Miss is going to be overlooking Arkansas less and more prepared for that defense that they're going to see. And I think Ole Miss does better in this game than they did last year. Now, I think this is the big thing here is, can these teams avoid a big letdown after what was probably a very emotional game for both of them last week, and something that was very demoralizing? They need to not let those teams they played beat them twice. They need to be ready for this game. They need to be up for this game. They need to not be thinking about the past or thinking about the rest of the season, thinking about this week and getting a win now. I think because of that, Ole Miss can get the win. They were able to get some things going at the end of that Alabama game. I know it didn't matter. It was garbage time. Alabama still blew them away. But I think getting a little bit going at the end of the game is some momentum. It's going to help with a little bit of that demoralization from getting just crushed by another team. And I think Georgia is the best team in the country. I think that Georgia defense really, really hammered on Arkansas and just being completely dominated in a game like that, not being able to score points, that's really, really tough on a team. I think Arkansas is going to be more worn down in this game than Ole Miss is, having played Alabama. I think Georgia was a tougher opponent. I think Georgia is a tougher team to play because they are so physical, especially on defense. They really just grind teams into dust. And I think that affects teams in the weeks after those games. I think they're going to be tired. I think it's going to be really tough for them. I think Ole Miss probably wins by a touchdown. They're a 5.5 point favorite. Give me Ole Miss minus the 5.5. Penn State at Iowa. Number 4 at number 3. Iowa, a 1.5 point favorite. I think this is going to be another great game. Although I will say I don't really think these are the number 3 and number 4 teams in the country. I think having them ranked that way right now makes sense with the way how the rankings are done. I don't think they're the 3rd and 4th best team. Now, they very well could be. This has been a weird year of college football. I I think we'll see. Iowa might be. Well, it's weird. Iowa has such a good defense, but I don't really trust their offense. I think if they played someone like Georgia or Alabama, I think Alabama can score enough points to beat them. I think Georgia can shut down Iowa's offense enough to beat them. I don't think either of these teams is really a complete enough team to be a top 4 team, to be a playoff caliber team. But we'll see how it goes. It may end up being that one of these teams is a top 4 team, and is able to get into the playoffs. I'm not sure that happens. I'm not sure they could either of these teams could really be competitive in the playoffs. I'm maybe a little bit more confident in Iowa just because their defense is so good. Uh, so that said, Penn State hasn't really been tested this year. They got wins over Wisconsin and Auburn, and I don't think either of those teams is really that great. Wisconsin has really struggled since that game. They have a very good defense, but really have no offense at all. And Auburn has really been kind of exposed a little bit, and they've looked not amazing against really some mediocre teams. Auburn did not look good against Georgia State. Uh, Auburn's run game got completely shut down basically by LSU last week, and still outside of a couple of really big and obviously game-winning plays by Bo Nix, the passing game didn't look great either. Auburn's offense really kind of struggled in that game, and I think Penn State is maybe looking a little bit better than they actually are because of those two games. I don't super trust Penn State's offense or defense in this game. I think Iowa has a good enough defense that they are going to really be able to limit Penn State. Iowa is a team who can drop 8 into coverage and still shut down the run, and Penn State has not been able to run it well anyway. I think this is going to be a really tough game for Penn State to get points in. Now, I do also think that Iowa isn't going to be able to score a ton of points just because of how their offense goes. Now, that completely changes if they're able to get a bunch of defensive scores and turnovers like they have been. If they're stealing 2 or 3 possessions or getting a pick six, that really, really changes the game. Um, I think even without those, though, with the spread being so small, it being at Iowa, I really trust Iowa more. I don't think Penn State can get it done. I think Penn State maybe even gets exposed a little bit in this game. Uh, I don't think they're going to be able to do a whole lot on offense, and I think Iowa sort of grinds it out. I wouldn't be surprised if Iowa wins by 4 points to a touchdown, even without any defensive scores. Yeah, give me Iowa minus the 1.5 in this game. I think Iowa gets it done. Okay, moving on. LSU at Kentucky. Kentucky, a 3.5 point favorite. LSU is really, they're getting desperate for another win here. This is one of the more winnable games left on their schedule. This one and Texas A&M, and I don't know if they can get a win here. I think they should be able to beat Texas A&M, but that's coming at the end of the season. I don't think that game is really going to matter for LSU's season. I think it's going to come too late. Um, I think Ed Orgeron is probably done at LSU. I think this is something that's been coming, that how this season has gone has sort of solidified some of those opinions. I don't think he can, outside of something ridiculous, sort of like how Gus Malzahn saved himself for another year or two by beating Alabama and Georgia in 2017. We could maybe see something like that with LSU if they get wins over Alabama and Florida. Maybe they don't fire him this year, but I think he's done at LSU. If not this year, then very soon. I think it's probably going to be this year. I think there's a chance that losing some of these games, like the game against Kentucky, could result in him being fired mid-season instead of at the end of the season. But I think starting next year, in next year's football season, LSU is going to have a different coach, would be my bet. Now, Kentucky, they're looking to build some momentum, get to a 6-0 start, something they haven't done in a very long time. But the Kentucky win against Florida, that's a great win for them. Super important for their program. A win that they hadn't gotten in an extremely long time. I think it was 86. It had been 35 years since they had won at home against Florida. That win was a little bit fluky. Uh, Florida moved the ball pretty well in that game. Box score wise, Florida dominated that game, but it was penalties and just silly mistakes on Florida's part that lost them that game. Um, Florida, you play that game 100 times, Florida gets wins more often than not there. Now that doesn't matter. You play the game once, and Kentucky won it. It's a great win for Kentucky. I don't want to take that away from them, but I don't want people to read too much maybe into that win and think that Kentucky is a better team than they are. Now that said, I think Kentucky is pretty well stacked up to beat LSU. The fans are going to be riled up. It's at Kentucky. LSU might be unfocused. That was a really tough late night loss against Auburn with a defense that was very tired. And there is all of this background stuff going on with, is Ed Orgeron going to get fired? All that kind of stuff around the program. All the off-field issues with Ed Orgeron. Does he still have the team behind him? I think a tired LSU defense gets worn down by Kentucky a little bit. That Kentucky is able to play smart football. They run the clock. They work this LSU defense. And I think LSU is just too one-dimensional. They have not been able to run the ball. That is a huge issue against anyone who has a decent defense. I think Kentucky does the exact same thing Auburn did. Is they're going to say, we're going to drop everyone into coverage and dare you to run the ball, knowing that you can't do it. And I think that's going to be a tough, tough ask for Florida against for LSU against a Kentucky defense that's pretty good. I think Kentucky gets enough stops here, runs the clock well enough on offense against an LSU defense that's probably going to be tired. I think the spread is just about right. I think Kentucky gets a win by 4 points here. Give me Kentucky minus the 3.5, and you may see Ed Orgeron fired mid-season with a loss here, and probably after they get blown out by Alabama is when you see him fired, if it goes like this. Okay, a couple of quick picks. Some games I don't really want to talk a ton about, but I wanted to get my pick in here. Alabama at Texas A&M. Alabama 17.5-point favorite. Yeah, Alabama minus 17.5 all day. I think they roll in there and absolutely destroy a Texas A&M team that is reeling. Yeah, give me Alabama minus 17.5. I think they probably win by 3 scores or more. Georgia at Auburn. Georgia a 15.5-point favorite. Similar thing here. I don't think Auburn has an offense that is going to be able to do much scoring against this Georgia defense. And with it being at Auburn, I would love it if Auburn can look good in this game. If they could get a win, that would be amazing. I do not think that happens in any way. I think it's going to be really, really tough for Auburn to get points. I personally am hoping that Auburn doesn't get shut out in that game. I would like them to score something. I think there's a chance that Auburn can limit Georgia's offense. Um, Georgia is probably going to be wanting to run the ball. They'll have their backup quarterback, Stetson Bennett, in. Auburn has at times had a good run defense, but they haven't played a lot of teams that are really great at running the ball. So I don't know if that's if their run defense looking good is because they played teams that can't run or because they actually have a good run defense. And the other issue with Auburn is their defense really hasn't played a complete game yet. They've played one half in a few of their games. They gave up a ton of passing yards to LSU last week in the first half and then completely shut them down in the second half. Similar thing with Georgia State the week before. Georgia State ran all over Auburn in the first half. In the second half, they shut them down. Part of that was Zacoby McClain coming back, but part of that is just that's how the Auburn defense has acted so far this year. We'll see. I think Auburn's only hope here is Georgia is very conservative. Um, Auburn has to hope that Georgia doesn't throw the ball very much, tries to run, and Auburn can shut them down and maybe force Stetson Bennett into some situations he doesn't want to be in, make him make some risky throws. Auburn's going to need a turnover. And really, the biggest issue for Auburn is they're going to need to find a way to score points. Georgia could win this game 14-0, and I wouldn't be surprised. Now, it would be Auburn covering, but that's not really getting shut out against one of your biggest rivals is never good. There's no moral victory there. I'm hoping that Auburn can get at least a touchdown. Maybe this is a 21-7 type game. It's a weird backdoor cover kind of thing by Auburn. I'm going to take Georgia minus the 15.5, though I really just do not trust Auburn's offense to be able to score points in this game. I think Georgia is going to get some short fields because of that. I think that leads to points. Georgia minus the 15.5. All right, that's it for my picks this week. Let me know in the comments if you think I got any of these wrong. Let me know what your picks are. If there's any games that I didn't cover you want to know my opinion on, ask in the comments. I'll give them to you. And otherwise, see you next time.